Welcome back, everyone. Before we begin the session, we have a few guidelines that would help run this session smoothly. Please mute your audio and video at all times. During the interaction time, please use the hand raise option to ask any questions so that the host would unmute you to speak. If you have any questions between the sessions, please type it at the chat box. Since Zoom is limited to 1,000 participants, the others can join via the YouTube link. The link for the YouTube will be posted only when the Zoom meeting is full. Questions will be taken from the YouTube chat box also. Please make sure that you sit in a place where you have proper internet connection. The feedback form will be given at the end of each session in the Zoom chat box as well as the YouTube chat box. The link will stay live only for a short time, after which it will be taken down. Please remember to use your participant unique ID while filling the forms. Thank you. Moving on towards our first session for the day. The topic for this session is Research Methodology, the Effective Approach by Professor Dr. Zamberi bin Jamaluddin, sir. It will be my honor to invite Professor Dr. Zamberi bin Jamaluddin, sir, once again to present his talk.
Thank you so much, Mr. Silas.
Thank you, sir.
If I may proceed, thank you so much for the nice introduction. Okay, it's a good morning to all the participants. It's afternoon here in Malaysia at the moment. I'm in Malacca. I'm not sure whether many of you know where Malacca is. Basically, Malacca is a state. It is about 1.5 hours from north of Singapore, and from the international airport, it is just about the same, like 1.5 hours from the Kuala Lumpur International Airport. So a brief about UTM. UTM is a University Technical Malaysia Melaka. So this is a technical university which has been established in the year of 2000 by the then government with the purpose of helping the nation, Malaysia at that time, to produce as many graduates in engineering and technology field with the capability of spearheading the countries towards developing developed country status. We are using the model of Hochschule in Germany, whereby it emphasizes on the practical skills. So I hope my audio is clear, and at the background is the picture of our faculty Kejuruteraan and Pembuatan, is Faculty of Manufacturing Engineering. So it's a great honor to be able to share some of the experience that I have in the field of research, especially on the topic of methodology. And thank you so much again to LND, Institute of Engineering and Technology, especially to the Department of Mechanical Engineering, to Prof. Satish Pujari for the invitation, and to my colleagues, especially Prof. Siva Rao, who is introducing me to this wonderful program, Research Tool and Methodologies. It's a 5-day event. I would like to congratulate firstly the organizer for being able to attract as many as 1,000 participants from all over the world. Hopefully, by looking at the topics that have been aligned for this for the week, they are all very important topics, and topics that I'm very sure could be very helpful to the especially to the students, postgraduate students later on. So allow me to share some of the small knowledge that I have on research tool. My background is basically in control system engineering, producing. On the field of, especially with regard to the application of control system in machine tools application, so CNC machine, milling machines, and also on topic related to industrial automation and mechatronics. Okay, we in UTM, we have manufacturing is in fact a little bit, it's a subsection of mechanical. So it might be new to some of you, but it basically it's a production engineering and another name for manufacturing. Okay, it's enough for that. Let me share my slides. Okay. I hope the view is okay. If you have any comments, you can stop me at any time. So it's I'm okay with that. All right. The topics given to me is research methodology, the effective approach. And when we talk about basically, I have the honor of graduating some PhD students and several masters by research students. And as we go through the Viva sessions, and normally among the important things that have been highlighted by the examiners basically is to scrutinize on the methods being undertaken by the candidates for their whether it's PhD or master by research, or it could be a master by thought course. So again, methodology is basically the heart of the programs. This is a make or die situation for the students. It depends on how well they conduct the experiments, how well they conduct if it is by quantitative or qualitative methods, because at the end of the day, the results very much depends on how good the methodology is. So, so that's how I will try my very best to share the best method in approaching methodology in the field of research. Again, I'm sure that all the participants are of various backgrounds, and some of you might be in engineering, some of you might not be in engineering, but I will try to balance it between the two. It'll be a bit biased from myself because of the background of in engineering. Okay, let us start. So I have prepared quite a number of slides. We try to stop by, it's afternoon here in Malaysia. It's 1:15 in the afternoon. So, and it's still, I think, morning there in India. Again, let's take a look at the learning outcomes. It's something that I hope could very well be as a guide to us, to all of us for this presentation. So I hope by the end of the session, we could look at some, of course, when we talk about methodology, normally we talk about data, and data can be in many forms. Some of the various data collection techniques. What are the limitations? What are the users and so forth? What are the instruments? What are the issues that affecting data collections, accuracy, reliability, validity, and maybe some problems in data gathering. Outlines. So I will start my presentation with some an overview of data gathering and data types, methods and techniques in data collections, and tool of instruments, pilot studies, pre-tests, choice of data collection methods, and problems in data collection. Problem here could be in the forms of challenges or issues that arises from the work on data collections. Okay, well, I will try to make it in the forms of as a thesis writing, for example, or paper writing. Okay, normally when we start off with our journey on research, basically the first method will be on formulation of the research problems or the problem statements. Okay, problem statements. That will be the first steps, and then followed by the objective and scopes. And then we look at the research designs and plan, experimental designs, and then we start with the data gathering. We test the hypotheses, and then we do the data analysis, data processing. And from that analysis, we do the evaluations. We try to draw some inferences, some conclusions. And finally, the report writing. It could be a thesis writing, could be a paper writing, a report writing, and so forth. Okay, so some pondering question before we start. This is some very, to me, it's some very good question that we could ask ourselves. In any work, in any research, normally the first thing that we need to understand is that what data do we need? Okay, this is very important. We must be very clear on the first steps. So, what data that we are to collect? Okay, we do not want to have a scenario whereby at the end of the day, at the end of the third year of the PhD studies, or at the end of our research grants, that we come to a conclusion that we have collected the wrong data. Okay, and then the next question would be, how are these data collected? Okay, and that's something that we also need to be very carefully designed. So how are these collected? What are the constraints that could be there in the way that we collect those data? Okay, and what is the correct way of collecting data? Data can be collected in many ways, and again, we want to ensure that it is being collected in the right way. Okay, so a lot of scrutinization would be done on this particular methods. Are the data valid? Okay, are the data reliable? And are the data can be accepted? Okay, so based on the data, of course, we will do the appropriate analysis, and from there we can come to a certain conclusion. So what conclusion can we make based on the data that we have collected? Okay, this is also another important point that we could will be affecting our overall process of collecting data for our research project. Okay, this is something which is very important. This is, to me, the gist of this presentation this morning or this afternoon here is about this is the next few slides. Okay, initially, all of us, must be very clear on this. Okay, so we have. I'm talking in the context of research work. So we have a title. So basically, normally the title comes last, and so as the abstract. But if you look at the title itself, okay, it comes from where? It comes from, firstly, is the literature review. That is basically the first step. Okay, in our research work, we perform literature review. Why are we performing literature review? Okay, the idea about research is basically to look at the research gap. Okay, so what people have done, what others have done, how it is being done, and what have been achieved. Okay, so in our field, for example, in my field in machine tools, control the development in machine tools. Okay, so I need to know that over the years, what have been done in this field? What are the controllers that have been designed and implemented? What are the strengths and weaknesses of these controllers? And how it is being applied? What are the limitations? What are the results that have been captured, then presented, demonstrated, okay, and been published? All right. So at the end of the literature review, we have what we call a critical review, whereby the research gap is being produced. And normally we put it in a table form. So we know that, okay, researcher A, B, and C have produced work on this topic, producing, for example, a new algorithms, a new design, a new initiative, frameworks. Okay, however, there is not much work being done on this area. Okay, so this would then create our problem statement. Okay, so from literature review, it will create our problem statement. Even though literature review normally comes in the second chapter of our thesis normally, and problem statements, the objective and the scopes come in the first introduction chapter. But basically, the literature review will give us the problem statement. What is being there? What is the general topic that we are considering? What are the methodology that we are proposing based on the literature review, basically. So from the problem statement, we can come up to the research objective. Okay, so we identified our research objective from basically from our problem statement. That's why in our problem statements, we have literature review, some of the important papers, journals that we cited, okay, to strengthen our our points that this is the area of work that requires more work, more further work, more improvement. All right, so that's where we got our research objective. And then we would then ask ourselves, okay, for example, that we have normally, in most cases, we have about like 3 research objectives. In most cases, it could be less, it could be more. And then we start to ask ourselves that, okay, then I have research objective 1, which come from my problem statement, which come from my literature review. Okay, so what would be, how should I then manage to meet this research objective? Okay, for example, research objective 1, and then I'm going to look at research objective 2. I will also ask the same thing, and research objective 3, and so forth. From here, we would then create our research methodology. Okay, research methodology is something that that us would provide us with the answers to the research objective. Okay, we then create a questionnaire, for example, or interview sessions, or survey forms for to fulfill my research objective number 1. For example, to evaluate the current or the market standings on the issues of maybe waste management in India, in Malaysia, in Japan, for example. So how it is? How can I evaluate this current or the current needs through some some tools? Okay, so that's how we got to know the research methodology, the appropriate research methodology for that particular research objective. And then number 2, maybe to design something, to design a framework. Okay, then again, it could be through research questionnaire, session, interviews, or maybe I will start off with some design, okay, on certain algorithms, mathematical tools, mathematical algorithms, in a way that could then come up with a certain product, for example, could be in software form, hardware forms, and maybe lastly to evaluate the outcome of that design process, to evaluate, to come to a certain conclusion. And I might need to know what kind of tools that I need to apply in order to evaluate a certain the result that I have obtained. Okay, so this is where research methodology is very important, because if we did wrongly, if we did or we wrongly specify our research methodology, then that would then impact our research objective. Okay, so the whole thing, the whole thesis, the whole research work could then be in jeopardy. Okay, that's why maybe my topic is being put as the number 1. So I hope this would give a clear route towards the rest of the sessions, with the rest of the distinguished speakers. Okay, so this is basically to summarize what I've said just now. Research objective 1 will identify as a method 1, and from method 1 we're going to have some data. Okay, and similar to other research objective, and maybe this should be method 2 or method 3. Could be the similar method, right? It could be method 2, could be method 3, or method 1. To continue from the above. Okay, so data also be a different data, different types of data 1, data 2, and data 3. Okay, there is a challenge to us on getting the right method, and of course to ensure that we have the best data, the right data, the valid data, so that we could then conclude with the right conclusion. Okay, I hope so far it's so good. Again, I'm open to questions throughout this presentation. Okay, a methodology to be used, it depends if all the resources are attainable, accessible, available, and affordable. So please keep in mind that whenever we, normally in the stage of writing a proposal, Okay, so basically before we start doing our research work, we write a proposal whenever we would like to apply for research grant, for example. Okay, we write a proposal, and in this proposal, normally we look at all this the thing that I have mentioning here. Do we have the right resources? Do we have the right people? Do we have the right skill sets of people who could do the experiments, who could help us with the experiment, who could help us with the development of the test rigs? Okay, do we have the right apparatus? Do we have the right equipment? Do we have the right instrumentations? Those are the kind of thing that we should ask ourselves. This is the kind of question basically that we ask ourselves when we are preparing the the proposal. Okay, and then the other thing is that affordable. Can we afford this kind of a test? Uh, some of the test equipment might not be available on site, so we might have to look somewhere else, to look at some other institutions or some other universities that could incur some costs. So can we afford that cost? All right, can we afford all the traveling, for example, and this kind of thing? All right, so this is the kind of thing that we have to put in place, be very clear of before we start with our research work. Okay, so data is basically a word for information, and data can be in the form of facts, figures, and other materials. It could be past and present. We are now in the period where COVID is playing havoc with our daily life. It's been there since last year, 2020. It's affecting us in India, in Malaysia. We have still a lot of active cases, and all over the world been impacted by COVID. And it has a grave impact on people who are doing research, especially of our current postgraduate students, people, professors, associate professors, researchers who have research grants, who are binded by their uh, milestones. Okay, because normally they have very strict milestones, and what COVID done to us is that it limits our presence in the universities, for example, in the research institutes or in the industries. So in terms of movement, we are very restricted. Um, even though this, in some countries things are getting better, but in some but we never know. Okay, things can go good, but it can comes back very badly very quickly. So that represents a challenge to us. So this is the good thing is that I'm putting here is that the word past. Okay, the past figures, the past data. So to share some of the things that we have done at the Faculty of Manufacturing here at UTM is that with our final year project. Oh, okay, final year project basically for our students. In Malaysia, we have restricted the movement of our students. They are not allowed to come to campus. So, but as an engineering students, it will be very difficult for them not to come to campus and not to be in the lab. So one of the suggestions, especially to those of our students working in the field of manufacturing process, manufacturing engineering materials, who need data in order to proceed, the kind of thing that I can propose to them is that to look at past data, okay? So in conference proceedings, in journals, maybe from our colleagues who are working on more or less similar topics. So we could in fact look at this past data that we will also known as secondary data, and try to use this data in a way, in such a way that we could find some novelty in it, and then they could justify us for our paper writing, or maybe a thesis for could be a master thesis or PhD thesis to supplement our work. So that's something that maybe for some of us we could be of a very important way of going about research made by the presence of COVID. Okay, systematically, this is the kind of thing that the word is very strong here. Systematically gathering data okay, would help the researchers draw inference, and we want to come to a certain conclusions that is that valid. Okay, so based on the objective that we have set forth. So the data gathering influence the credibility of the researchers. For some people, or for some researchers, for some postgraduate students, uh, this is the kind of thing that their Viva session sometimes can be very quickly, or could be a very miserable one for them if they don't pass with the flying colors on their topic of methodology. Okay, this is again, as I told you just now, it's the life and death of the students. If they can prove that they have a good systematic data gathering method, which then produce a valid data, and then of course the rest of the thing will be very uh, straightforward to them, right, to the examiners. So because they are very sure that data they have been collected truly, correctly, in a valid way. Okay, so credibility of the researchers will be on hold, will be on the line whenever we present our work through it be a live presentation, conference presentation, could be in the way that we present our work in journals and papers. Okay, for example, this is very straightforward, very clear, simple example. Okay, for example, some people work in the nutrition survey. Okay, they use 3 different weight scales in 3 villages. Okay, some very straightforward, but sometimes if you don't properly or we don't thoroughly manage our methodology, this is something that could happen. Okay, the researchers did not record which scale they were used. There are 3 scales, okay, but he or she did not record which scale is being used on which village, for example. Okay, so he's not using one single scale, he's using 3 different scales for some reason. Maybe they are working on this simultaneously. He or she did not record which scale is being used on which village, and then what happened is that they are not standardized. And what happened is that when it comes to the data being collected, then there could be some miscommunication, some ambiguity in terms of the validity of the data, because then we could not accept those data because we do not know what are the tools that are being used for that particular data gathering in that particular village, for example. So this is such a very simple example which highlight the way that the right methodology, thorough talk about the right method to use should be done in the very early stage of the research work. Okay, but this is some of the there is a question here. You can stop me. You can ask me now. Paulami Banerjee, if I mention your name correctly, you can interrupt me. Any questions? I can hear you. Okay, I will continue then. Okay, there are different types of mode of gathering data. So again, I will try to balance myself between engineering and maybe non-engineering. Okay, some of us even in engineering we do surveying, observations, interviewing. Because some of us work in management, management in manufacturing. We also have management. Industrial engineering has a lot of work.
Hello, sir.
Yeah. Are you you want to ask question, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I will try to answer, please.
Yes, sir.
Please.
Sir, what is the primary and secondary data? What is primary and secondary data?
Yes, but that's what I'm saying, primary and secondary data. Primary data is basically data that you collected firsthand, and secondary data is data that you collected from it could be from your literature review, could be from the library, could be from the maybe from World Health Organization, United Nations, and things like that. Is that your questions?
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, I have a slide on that anyway after this. All right. Okay, thank you. I hope that helps. All right. Interview. There are also
So we can
People.
take the questions at the end of the session, sir.
Okay, then I follow.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we also have an experimental design. This is whereby all the engineering work is being done, and we are always familiar with this. And previously collected data, that is what I mean by secondary data. Okay, primary data, again, I cannot go very fast on this. All right, primary data, it can also come from observation, experiment, simulation. I mean, the interview session, panel, case studies, things like that. And when we work with secondary data, normally we should ask ourselves in terms of the how to scrutinize this data. Okay, these are the data published in literature. It could be unpublished also. Okay, but be very careful. Whenever we work with secondary data, we have to be very careful because we need to ensure that this data is valid. It's a data that could strengthen our primary data, for example. So we need to do something with the data. Okay, so we could not just simply take data from maybe person A or paper A or organization A. We have to do something with the data. For example, researcher A, which published those data, have looked into that data in perspective A, for example. Okay, so he looked into another perspective for maybe for a different application. So we can come in as a researcher B, okay, looking at data from researcher A. Okay, we could analyze it differently. We could use another tools or method to analyze the same data differently. We could do, meaning that we could have a different analysis and we could reinterpret it in a different ways for different purpose. All right. So, but we are still working on the same pool of data. All right. So this is something that we have to be very careful with. All right. And then we could come to a different conclusion, which might be different from the researcher A, which have gathered the data, work on the data, but from a different perspective. Okay. So be very careful on this. We do not want to have an argument between researcher A and researcher B arguing about the interpretation of the similar data. Okay, and it must be acceptable data. And normally when we do this, we must have to consent from the data keeper, data holder, for us to use those data. Okay, and again, this is something that my supervisors reminded me when I did my PhD in Catholic University of Leuven in Belgium. He kind of like scolded me that Zamri, he said, why are you working on this thing? People have worked on this. Just get it from them. Okay, focus on the thing that you want to have your contribution on in. Okay, so it struck me that, okay, yeah, that's true. Why should we repeat something that people have done? Okay, we should have just simply collect those data, ask for the data. Also, the data could be also method. Okay, and ask their permission. This could be done in terms of citation, and then try to improvise on that. Okay, so that could help basically very much, especially to those of you who could not come to campus, who could not come to the laboratories, who are restricted to the four walls of your rooms, all right, or maybe to your online classes, so online labs, unless you have facilities whereby you could use a network that like a VPN that you could access your lab equipment online through your home Okay, so that's the kind of thing. But normally we use secondary data as a supplementary data for reference purposes, for benchmark. Seldom we use it as our main data, but it could be used. Okay, it's quick. Why is it important? Why is it nice to use to look at the secondary data? It's quick. It's readily available. You don't have to design your test rig. You don't have to design much work. It's readily available. It's cheap. It covers a lot of for some data. It has uh, uh, prolonged period of time. Okay, it could be collected for maybe period of 10 years, 5 years, okay, space and times, broad database leading to generalization, but always cross-check, okay, your secondary data with your primary data, okay, especially if you work on a PhD or your PhD, or as a researcher going forward in your research work as a lecturer, professors, and so forth. Okay, disadvantages, of course, you must very sure that whether the data is suitable or not for your work. Is it up to date? You do not want to work on data that is outdated. We also have to check for the accuracy and availability and accessibility. Can we access those data? Those data could be restricted. Maybe because of the pattern issues, availability is not, maybe we might not have access to those data. We might have to go through a third party library, for example, to access those data and things like that. Okay, then we always have to scrutinize those secondary data for reliability. We need to answer who collected those data, whether there are bias in terms of the way that the data are being collected. Sometimes it could be some bias in the way data are collected. Sometimes researchers, for some particular reason, would like to collect data that is biased to their research grant, for example, to their organization. Maybe they would like to highlight something about the organization, so then they are collecting data that is biased towards their organizations or their programs, for example. So this is something that we have to clearly look at so that we have a valid data that we could present. Okay, suitability, whether the terms are they comparable, are the units of measurements comparable, the scopes and the nature of studies and surveys are comparable. So this kind of thing that we have to really look at. Okay, so again, we have enough time to do this since we are not collecting those data. So we very much must ensure that these are being followed. Adequacy, the level of accuracy, are they adequate? Are they wider than the present study that you are doing? And completeness, whether this data is complete, whether they have the right sampling methodology, sampling frequency, sampling times, and things like that. Okay. Again, where the data is being collected, whether they are collected from the right geographical location. Sometimes be very careful. For example, we in Malaysia, when someone work with which has HVAC, for example, air conditioning system, or someone who work on heat transfer, he or she should get data from the same tropical countries. Don't get data from Europe, for example, from Japan, for example, from maybe some part of India, for example, Mediterranean, which might be biased or which might not be of the right geographical location. So they are not comparable unless the nature of work really want to compare the work of the tropical country with that of the four season countries. Okay, you need the current and things like that. That's something I have told you. Okay, and we always would like to compare apple to apple. This is something which is sometimes very difficult. Okay, students would like to try to compare certain techniques, maybe you would like to compare certain outcome from certain work. So be very sure that you are comparing apple to apple. Okay, then so that you are not biased towards the other side. All right, something which is quite difficult. Okay, qualitative research technique. Some of us work on qualitative techniques, meaning that identification, exploration of numbers, basically on human behavior, motivation, opinion, attitudes. Normally, why, what, how. Okay, now sometimes in engineering, this is the first part of our research work. So sometimes, whereby we would like to understand the current scenario. For example, if I would like to work on a new machine setup, maybe I would like to start with some questionnaire on some of the machine people, machinists or technicians who work on machining, on getting some data about what are the why, what's, and how that could then be translated to my research problem statement. Okay, in quantitative, we are talking about how many, for example, how often. This is about numbers, data, and how significant. So those could be those could be the questions. Then they both could be used in the same single studies as I told you. For engineering, we could start off with quantitative, qualitative, and then we proceed towards quantitative research techniques. Okay, literature review again. Coming back to my first initial slides, literature review is the most important part of our research work. Okay, this is where the examiners, for example, or the journal paper reviewers would look into in the first part of their examining process. Where is the novelty? Okay, where is the research gap? What are the strengths and weaknesses of the method that have been being done and being published by the previous researchers? Okay, so this is the kind of thing that the students or us as researchers must focus on. Okay, for example, this is like the kind of table that researchers could do. For example, this is from a student, in fact, from his five sessions. He tried to look at the research gaps. Again, my work is on machining, machine tools. And we are working on the controller development of controllers that could compensate for disturbance. Okay, so the students, my students here, he have highlighted some very important journals, publication. He looked at the strengths and the weaknesses. And from there, he could then identify the research gaps. So what haven't been done yet, that could be our starting point. Okay, and from there, again, once we know that, what are the techniques that have been existed, could we still work on those techniques? Are there rooms with regard to those techniques whereby we could then establish a stronger method of strengthening those techniques? Okay, so this is where research gaps bridge towards research methodology. That's why in chapter 2, normally when we talk about thesis, at the end of chapter 2, we have already highlighted the research methodology that we would like to propose. Okay, we are very clear in that particular moment that, okay, I'm going to use method A, I'm going to use machine A, I'm going to use software A, for example, software B, for example, based on what I have learned from the research review that I have done. Okay, so it's something like that. All right, this is a simple, just a quick comparison between data collection using qualitative and quantitative. Okay, as I told you, basically qualitative, this is done during the early phases of the research project. And normally a quantitative is at the back end of the research work. Design images as study unfold. So as we collect our data, preliminary data from the surveys that we have done, from the interview session that we have performed. So from there onwards, we start to see the kind of design that we should be getting towards to, okay? So in terms of quantitative, all aspects of the study are carefully designed before data is collected. So we already work on it, okay, before data is collected, okay? So this is something that which is different, all right? So researcher is a data gathering instrument, okay? When we talk about qualitative, it is us ourselves that is collecting those data, okay, through those tools that we will talk about later on. But in quantitative, the researcher uses tool. Okay, there are tools whereby the data is being collected. Okay, for qualitative, data is in the form of words, pictures, objects, and data is in terms of numbers and statistics. In terms, I will work with quantitative. Okay, analysis of data such as words from interview, pictures, videos, objects, and things like that. For quantitative, it involves numerical data. Okay, so qualitative could be subjective. could be depending on the individual interpretation or observations. So for in-depth interview sessions, but for quantitative, this is a very precise measurements analysis. Maybe you could be using certain tools like root mean square of certain readings, things like that, okay? Qualitative data is more rich, time consuming. We have to send out hundreds and hundreds of data to be collected. But quantitative data is more efficient, okay? But we might miss contextual detail in here. Okay, I'll try to be very fast. Okay, pitfall. What pitfall means? Pitfall means a trap. Okay, we might fall into this trap if you are not careful enough. Okay, what are the pitfalls? Okay, let's take a look. The first one. It is often difficult to keep study focus. Because sometimes what happens is that this mostly happen to my students. Okay, they fall into a loop. All right, focus on few important variables and hypotheses. You must focus on a few important variables. So we might have many different variables. Okay, we have many different variables, but try to focus on the variables that are very important to us. Okay, so stay focused. The pitfall here is that if we don't design our methodology carefully, we will be falling into the shotgun approach. You know what shotgun means? If you play games, so we just simply like bang, 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 bang. Right? We just shooting randomly and hoping that we hit the target. Okay, by using a shotgun, of course, we have a good likelihood of shooting a target. So we might miss the target. Okay, however, we might miss the target, and we might hit. Okay, things that we're not supposed to target. All right, so we can confuse us between major and minor variables, important variables. So this is what happens when we do not design our experiment. We do not design our methodology carefully. All right. So and then the other thing is that more is not necessarily better. Okay, don't try to get don't fall to the trap whereby collect as much data as possible. All right. So we are now consuming more than necessary time for data gathering. Okay, so be very, very lean. Identify the kind of data that you would like to collect. If in my case, normally in my case, when we are simulating or when we are doing data gathering, there are a lot of data that the machines can provide us. But simply focus on a few that is important to us. For example, in my case, reference data, tracking error data, position error data, the actual position error data, maybe the current data. Current meaning here is the electricity data, the control command signal data to the drive systems. This is the kind of thing. So the rest would be could be a supporting data. Okay, we might not need those data anyway. All right. So be very careful on that. Okay. The other thing is that transparency. Okay. I always told my students that make sure that when you write your methodology, you are writing for someone else. You're not writing for yourself. Okay, you know everything from A to Z on how the data is being obtained. Okay, you know it. You know what software you use, what technique you use, what sampling time you use, what materials you use. You have those information. This information must be revealed. Okay, you must tell all what software you use. Are you using MATLAB? Are you using SolidWorks? Are you using AutoCAD? What version of SolidWorks are you using? What tools in MATLAB are you using? In such a way that when a person B comes, okay, when a person B comes, he could successfully replicate the same work and obtain more or less the same data. Okay, this is the kind of thing that the people later on when you write your methodology, you must be very strong on this. It's a step-by-step basis. You have to write everything. Okay, that's why normally I have my last time it's like a Bible book, must write all the details on the experiments. Sometimes when you do experiments, you also need to note, I'm doing this experiment in the morning. Okay, because sometimes in certain countries, you have a very big difference in terms of the environment, the morning environment and the late evening environment. Okay, the morning could be maybe the temperature would be very nice. In the afternoon, the temperature might drop quite significantly. That could have impact on the kind of data that you are measuring. Okay, you must also see some foreseeing problems. Okay, this is something that I have talked just now. What could be a certain problem here, like fatigue? If the data is being collected for a longer period of time, will that involve fatigue in terms of the tester or the researcher? Health issues. Will the researchers should be sitting for a period of 2 to 3 hours without a lot of movement? Will that be demotivating the researcher? So this is the kind of thing that we have to take into account when we design our methodology. Okay, situational factors, relationship with the colleagues. Do we have distractions? Are we sharing the same office space or the same lab space? Okay, that could somehow trigger unnecessary uh, problems with our colleagues. Okay, we do not want to have that. All right. Instrumentation. Do we have any restriction on instrumentations? The resolutions, availability. Are the instruments online? Are the instruments up and running? Or the instruments are down because of maintenance. Okay, so this is the kind of thing. Analysis factors, errors. What kind of errors are we expecting? Okay, from those particular instrumentations and environment. Okay, quality control. Do we have the right quality control that could help us to answer the reliability of our data collections? Okay, for example, the kind of analysis that we try to identify. Initially, it could be like, for example, this is a case of where we have input data. This is just an input data. This is like a position tracking data. This is an FFT analysis of the tracking error. And this is the position result, for example. Okay, initially, when we look at the data, we just simply might have the first layer, which is a pattern. Okay, we might say that, okay, this is a single harmonic. You just only have one frequency. This is a two harmonics. You can see there are two different frequencies here. And this is a three harmonic. And there you can see like three peaks, two peaks, three peaks. And here we could see that there is no peak at all once that we have applying the certain techniques. Okay, that is the first layer of analysis, quantitative analysis of the data. All right, so the first is basically to look at simply the patterns that the data provide us. Okay, accuracy of the research work. This is basically some of the things that worries us as a researcher. Whether I have done, can it be scrutinized enough? Because we always remember that the paper reviewers, external examiners, they will always scrutinize our data. Do we have the right data? Okay, will anyone believe in my findings? Okay, I'm just presenting my data in table form. Can people, by looking at those data, can people believe in my data? Okay, and how can this be done? Through proper write-up, of course, by declaring all the things that we have done. So people who work in the same field, they can have a sense of feeling that this is the right data that is being presented. Okay, so always be careful with reliability and validity. And when we talk about reliability, we talk about consistency of the instruments. For example, this is a case whereby clearly state that, for example, we have an experiment here. This is a milling machines equipped with an encoder. So we should highlight this is an encoder with what resolution. 0.01 micron, for example. And then what kind of software are we using? Is it Katia? Is it SolidWorks? And then what kind of controller? Are we using MATLAB, Simulink? And what kind of interface that we are working on? Is it DSpace 1104? Okay, so these are the kind of details that we must clearly state in our work so that the data can be looked at reliable and valid. Okay, and this is a nice statement. A measurement may be reliable and not valid. Okay, so it could be reliable but it might not be valid if the method is wrong. Okay, however, if a measurement is valid, so we have a valid measurement, then it is of course reliable. Okay, and if it is not reliable, it cannot be valid. I hope you understand what it means here. Okay, all right. This is a nice word on in terms of the reliability and validity. All right. So the key thing here is that if the measurement is valid, then it is reliable. All right. That's the key thing. Validity. Are we measuring what we think we are measuring? Okay. Sometimes we must be very careful. Data that we are measured. Okay. But are you sure that you are getting the right data? Okay. This could be in terms of qualitative and also in terms of quantitative. The way that we construct our questionnaires. Okay. No procedure is perfectly reliable. Okay, perfectly reliable. There's no procedures. But if a data collection procedure is unreliable, then it is invalid. So that's straightforward, right? If the data is not reliable, then of course it is not valid. But if it is reliable, it not necessarily be valid. The kind of same statement that we have looked in the previous slide. Triangulation, this is the kind of method that we could use in order to cross-check our data. We might use some triangulation in order to check whether the data that we obtain is correct or not. Okay. Sampling error, again, we must understand that what are the errors that we have. Is it small or large? Is it random error? Okay, or systematic error? Okay, if we work with the systematic error, then we could rectify it clearly. But we work with random error, then a lot of work that we need to do. Okay, non-sampling errors, researcher error, interviewer error, responder error. This is sometimes something that happen to some of us in terms of interview technique, recording responses, and so forth. The best method to collect data, okay. Something that I share also from my students' slides presentation. This is the way whereby that we are very clear on what we do. Okay, in my work, we must very clear on the kind of controller that we want to design. We have our test controller, okay, as the basis of our experiments. So for example, in here it is cascade PPI, and what are the enhancement that we are working with? Those are the least. Okay, what are the kind of data that we are measuring? It must be a sinusoidal signal or what frequencies, and why are we using these frequencies? Okay, and how are we validating this? Are we validating it numerically, experimentally, using, if you are doing it numerically, what software are we using? And if we are doing it experimentally, what kind of experimental setup that we are preparing? Okay, how these data are collected and how are they being analyzed? Okay, are we looking at the maximum tracking error, maximum errors? Are we looking at the root mean square, or are we looking at the Fourier transform of those data? Kind of thing. Okay, this is that must be very clear at the moment that we are conducting our work. All right. So pre-studies, pre-coding, and pre-testing the tools. All right. For example, okay, look at these slides also by my students. She, in this particular case, is like pre-testing the tools. Okay, if I'm using this tool, okay, a simple reference input type to the controller, what could be the limitation? Okay, what could be the limitation? For example, if I'm using this tool, what would limits the kind of input that I can provide? Opportunity. What are the opportunity that could arise if I'm selecting this particular method? Okay, and what would be the possible solution in the way that we are using this method, possible outcome. So this is a kind of a very nice way whereby we already map our research methodology in terms of the designs, the software parts, the hardware parts, and the system validation, system evaluation, whether the adaptability, compatibility, and then the way the performance-wise. So I would very much encourage all of you to maybe to take a look at this way, and could be very helpful. Okay. I can skip that. Collections again. Some of this I have share with you. Collect yourself your original data, a fresh primary data. You could examine record relics if you are working on something which is very old, relics. Participants, advantage and advantages. Non-participants, I think I will try to be very fast on this. Observations. You might be interested in behavior rather than perception. So this kind of thing that we have to balance ourselves. To those of you who are working with the observations, to be sincere, I'm not very much into observations, into qualitative analysis. I'm very much into quantitative. So observation does not work well. Could be a reason, might be bias. Okay, experiments, control studies where researchers attempt to understand cause and effect relationship. Okay, that's why we have experiments. We look at the cause and effect relationship. Replication, so how many times that we have to repeat? 10 times is okay. Randomize, logical control, things like that. Lab experiments, the simulations, again, are we doing the right simulations, the right software? Observation, man-computer simulation, sometimes role-playing simulations, asking people face-to-face, clinical depth of the interview, whether it's intensive, is it non-directive, telephone interview, group interview. I think this kind of thing that I will be sharing the slides. I think the organizer will have the slides, and you could take a look at this. Ask consult people in writing. You could also ask, this is maybe by old-fashioned way of writing. That could be slashed with like Google Forms. We put the Google Form survey forms. No, normally we could do that now. Questionnaires work well for measuring awareness, gathering usage, investigating your market share. Not work well for evaluating values of services, identifying usage barriers and things like that. Choices of data gathering could be a combination of these trade-off of the various factors. It's something that we have to look at. Evaluation criteria, we have to be very concerned on the efficiency, how efficient the evaluation tools is, anonymity, neutrality. This is especially when we work with questionnaires, supervision required, ability to use visual aids, controlling variables, and this is some of the things that from literature that I look at the different techniques and their advantage and possible constraints by these different techniques. Okay, I won't go into detail into that. Common problems. This is something that I would like to asking, maybe you being there, asking the question that might be intimidating to the respondent. Those kind of thing that we must be very careful. Embarrassing questions, question that may be very personalized. Leading questions, sometimes we try to lead the respondent into something. The way that we're asking questions, that we try to lead it into some conclusion. Okay. All right. Okay, this is an important aspect. I'm nearing the end of the slides. Ethics. When we talk about research methodology, okay, we should ethics in terms of data addition. Okay, I'm sure that all of you, being a good researchers, ethical researchers, but we must be very careful that none of our students editing the data. Okay, sometimes we know that some data have been presented in table form, and this is where that the data manipulation could come into place. So please help ensure that our students, whether it's undergraduate students or postgraduate students, do not fall into this trap of editing data. They might be pressured, okay, to produce good data. So especially if you can see that the data is very like a perfect data, we could always scrutinize the researchers, the students, for example, on how those data are being gathered, what method they are using, what experiments, what are the tools they are using. From there, we could cross-check the validity of the data and the reliability of the data. So data editing, making up of data is more or less a similar. Okay, violation of assumptions. Sometimes we do some assumptions on some of the data that we collected. So be very careful on the assumptions that we made. Okay, and this is something that I would be a bit worried. Can computer software? This is happening to most of to some of my undergrad students. Okay, nowadays what happened is that we could just simply click some menu on the software. For example, me on my field, when we work with PID, sorry, PID controller. This is very basic form of controller. Long time ago, we as a controller designer, we have been taught about how to design P, I, and D. What are the techniques we use? Okay, but nowadays with just a click in MATLAB or in Simulink, we could have all the optimized value of P, I, and D. And the students normally do not have an idea about how those values are being formed. What are the basis of those values being selected? Okay, we just click a button on the screen or on the keyboard, and it comes, the software gives us a data. Without the students' ability to look at the data and try to foresee that, okay, this data comes from what? From what backgrounds? Okay, what are the bases that the software came with this data? So this is something that we as professors or researchers or senior lecturers must try to work on with our, try always ask the students that, how do you get this data from? What are the analyses that yeah, the computer might be based on? Okay, so don't just be because if that's not if they don't have the theoretical knowledge on the topic, they will be trapped into this CAN software computer syndrome of not knowing that how it is being obtained. Okay, acknowledgement. Don't be shy. Don't be stingy with our acknowledgement. Acknowledge our lab technicians. Acknowledge our students. Acknowledge our faculty members. Acknowledge the university. And I'm sure all of you are very good researchers. I'm sure that all of you always acknowledge the right person. Okay. Plagiarism, of course, is very dangerous. We could be punished. We plagiarize, so always have your reference ready so that all your citations. Not reporting contradictory results. What does it mean? Sometimes there could be data that is out of place. Okay, should we report it, or should we keep it silent? This is open for debate. In fact, there might be some ambiguity in the pattern of the data that we recorded. Should we declare it? Should we expose it? Or should we just keep quiet about it? Meaning that we are not reporting it. So this I open for discussion. Okay, failing to observe, respect certain cultural values, traditional taboos. valued by your informer. This is where when we work with people, where we got data from our qualitative arrangement and things like that. Okay, some examples about the way that the methodology is being designed. Normally, when we work with methodology, we work with flowcharts. Flowchart must be very, very carefully done, carefully crafted. So the supervisors might really take a look at it, and we have to see that, okay, this is the part whereby we answers our objective one. Okay, maybe this is the part. Okay, maybe the part on the controller design and analysis is where we going to obtain our objective two, we design on controllers. Okay, together with the observer design. So, and then experimental validation, this is where we're going to validate or obtain our research objective number 3. Okay, what are the kind of analysis that we are going to do with the data that we obtain? Okay, what are the evaluation that we're going to do? Okay, so this is the kind of mapping that we should be always being done to map the way that the research methodology is to be conducted, the equipment that we are using, the method that we are planning, and the tools that we're using. All right. So again, that's all from me. We have 10 more minutes before the end of the time. I would like to locate this for Q&A. These are some of the references that I have used throughout this presentation. And I'd like to stop sharing maybe and revert back to Mr. Silas and maybe Dr. Prof. Satish for the Q&A. I hope it is helpful to all the listeners. It could be very, very on the surface level, but I hope it gives a good understanding about the what methodology should be, how to strategize about going about collecting data and preparing for the data collections, evaluating in the data and come to a conclusion. And with that, I conclude my presentation with a note of thank you to all for your time, and we could open for some Q&A session, and I hope I could answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. Dear participants, it's now time for the queries session. If you have any queries, please raise your hands. I think we are already having some hands raised over here. So we'll start with B. Rupla Naik. You can please unmute your mic, madam, and ask your question. B. Rupla Naik. Not able to hear your voice, ma'am. Okay, meanwhile, we'll take the next question. We'll come back to her. We'll take the next question from Redwin Naim. So, could you please unmute yourself, please?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good afternoon here. Good morning.
So, could you please elaborate something on the hypothesis setting? I mean, how from the research data we could set a hypothesis that is going to be more reliable and more helpful for us to do our, research. Hypothesis setting.
Hypothesis setting, okay. This is the part that I'm not very expert on because my work is basically on does not involve hypothesis. But basically, okay, I will try my best to answer this. When we talk about this is basically, are you engineering? Are you in the field of engineering?
No, I'm from management. Management.
Yes, management does a lot of hypothesis. Hypothesis is the kind of question that you ask that you try to evaluate whether you have the right hypothesis, right? And normally there is a statistical also tools being aligned to those hypothesis. So it'd be very difficult for me to answer you, but you look at your research questions, okay, and then you look at your research objective, something that you would like to prove. What are the things that you would like to prove? Okay, that would be the basis of your hypothesis. For example, you might say that majority of the person, majority of students like to have online classes compared to face-to-face classes. That could be your
Hypothesis.
okay, and then you should design your tools on how to test your hypothesis. Through maybe what kind of questionnaire that you would like to design, number of participants, from what backgrounds, or what levels, things like that. And then what are the tools that you're going to use to evaluate those data that you're going to have, so that at the end of the day, you could prove that your hypothesis is correct by what percentage, 90%, 95%, and things like that. So you work together with your statistical knowledge. I hope I helped you, Ridwan.
Very much clear. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you, sir. We'll take the next question from Mr. Ashik Mohammed.
Okay.
Sir, could you unmute yourself?
Yes, sir. Good morning. Very good morning, sir.
Good morning, Ashik.
Sir, I'm a scholar, full-time scholar from Vishakhapatnam. My background is engineering itself. So recently, I'm gonna submitting my journal, but actually, I was looking for free journals, but it was unfortunate for me that it is not getting any free kind of journal, because they are giving a third-party journal, and they are giving us some citations and views also. But since as we are the scholars, we have we are actually looking for a free journal, because it will have some good credibility. So could you please suggest us how to find the free journals? Because most of the journals we found, we are getting such kind of things. Some around in Indian rupees, it could cost 80,000 to 90,000 rupees. So it is a huge bit for us, and our university looking for a free journals. So please.
It's beyond the topic, but I will try to help you. I understand that nowadays there are a lot of journals that have a certain fees. Are you a postgraduate student?
Actually, I'm a
faculty.
Yes, sir.
All right, it's okay. First of all, you have to look at the your field of studies first, because there are, of course, many journals which have depending on the field of studies. So try to focus on what field. Okay, and then you can very well go to Scopus. Scopus website. Scopus has a good database, so you could write your topic of interest, and then you will list down all the relevant journals. There are, of course, many journals which is many journals which is FOC, which does not require us to pay certain fees. However, it could take some time, okay, for the paper to be reviewed and published. And in the field of engineering, there are many examples. One is International Journal of Advanced Manufacturing and Technology, IJAMT. That's one that will come to my mind. But the best way, since
I'm from instrument technology background, sir, actually.
Management technology.
Instrumentation technology.
Instrumentation.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about precision.
Okay.
I'm not sure whether they got fees on that or not. You could always try to look at IEEE. Normally they got some fees. IEEE.
Okay.
Xavier, but the best thing for you, my suggestion is to go to Scopus.
Yes.
Go to Scopus, or you can go to Schemago.
Okay.
Okay, Schemago is also you could list out the journal, so you can get the list from Scopus. Scopus and Schemago is very related. Okay, SCIMAGO is Schemago, and you
Okay.
can identify the journal first. So go to the topics, instrumentation, maybe instrumentation. Search what are the journals in instrumentations, or you could just simply Google
Yes.
free journals in instrumentation. Okay, you go to Scopus. It will give you a list of from Q1 to Q4, list of Scopus index journals. Okay, from there you can identify yourself. There are many other journals which is FOC, free of charge.
Sure, sir.
I'm so sorry I couldn't give you the right away the name of the journals, but that depends very much on your background.
Shall we take the next question, sir?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Before that, participants, there's a quick announcement. Kindly ask questions that are relevant to the topic because sir is already here and he will be answering the questions relevant to the topic. The other questions can be actually posted in the feedback form. We have provided a provision there for the queries. So if you have any questions out of the topic or out of the box, you can actually put them there and we'll try to sort it out and get back to you on this. With that, we'll have Mr. Polami Banerjee. Sir, could you unmute yourself, please?
Hello.
Hello, yeah, Polami.
Sir, can you please explain how do we arrange our research paper into chapters? Means what are the chapters, main chapters, where we include the introduction?
Okay, I will try to help. Okay, basically, when you write a journal papers, you will start off with introduction. The introduction is basically your literature review. Okay, well, when I told just now that this is the part which is very important because in there you do your problem statement. It should be there, and basically your literature review. The research gap should be highlighted there, so that when people read your journal, they already know the research gap. Okay, and then it will pass through your methodology. Methodology could be divided into two. Sometimes some people would like to start with the design part. If they are working on some design, what are the fundamental of the design that they are working on, and then you could introduce if you are working on some experiments, what are the experimental setup that you use, what are the test rig that you use, what are your software, equipment, and things like that. So these two part methodology could be in both ways. Okay, there could be in the some part of the results. If you work on the designing a certain algorithms, okay, and then you show your results. All right, you show your results, and there will be a lot of graph, data, patterns, and things like that. Then you discuss your results. Okay, discussion should be related to the data that you presented, but do not just simply very briefly look at the pattern. So you must critically discuss your results, and then you conclude. Basically, that's about it. And then you do your acknowledgement. I hope I helped you, Polami. Those are basically the content. Introduction. You can have your literature review, your gap, methodology.
Yes, sir.
You can have your design part there, and then your research, your result development, result discussion, and you can have your discussion and conclusion and recommendation.
Okay, sir. Sir, who is the author, co-author, and associate author?
That depends on you. If it could be your professor as your first author, it could be you as the writer. Normally, the writer is the first author.
And co-author?
Co-author, so it can be your friends in the lab to help you with the work. That help you with the analysis. It could be your SV supervisors or colleagues.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, you're welcome.
The next question will be taken by Mr. Aradhana Raj. Please unmute yourself.
Hello, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Is it afternoon there now? 12 o'clock, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sir, what is the difference between doing a research in science subject and social science subject?
Okay. Are you now are you an engineering student or
No, sir, I'm completed my graduation this year.
okay? Between science and social science. Okay, social science basically they involve a lot of qualitative kind of work. Social, they try to show some. I'm not a social science, so I might be biased. So please forgive me. There might be some social scientists here listening to me to us, but maybe I should start with science background. Okay, engineering. Engineering basically has a lot to do with the data. We develop some tools. We could be using tools to develop new tools. We could improvise existing tools. We could creating a new product by using maybe a new technique. We could also include some social sciences in our work. For example, we would like to design a certain product for a certain group of people. So that might be combination with some social sciences data that we might require, maybe the background of the people, the social strata of the people, the economic background, skill and things like that. So like the preliminary studies before we properly design our work, our apparatus, our systems to obtain the data or to improvise the existing system. So when you work with science, you can have both ways. Some elements of social science and a major part of it would be engineering or science. But if you work with the social science, most of the time, it could be testing some hypotheses. It could be, I think those are most of the time it would be that. A lot more on the perceptions of people, try to prove some notions and things like that. So a bit less on theory, I think, compared to science, so and engineering. Theory in terms of social science got their own theory, of course, but the theory, when I say theory here, in terms of engineering theories and sciences. I hope I answer
Yes, sir.
you,
Yes, sir.
Aradhana.
Sir, there is another question. Sir, how to conduct a literature review?
Okay, literature review. This is very important. First, you must mind map yourself. Okay, your field. Normally, I would ask my student to start off with a big title. If I'm working with machining, for example, okay, machining. So you have to, what are different types of machining? And then you try to trickle it down. Try to break it down into pieces. What are the topics in machining that interest you? Is it advanced machinings? Is in computer kind of a machining? And then what are the technique used? So it kind of like you start with the big picture and you trickle it down. So what my best advice is for you to write your table of content first for your literature review. So you write 2.1 is what? 2.1 is machine tools application. 2.2 servo drive systems, and then you have 2.2.1. So just write the table of content. Then you have your bird view understanding about, okay, these are the kind of thing that I would like to research on until the part that where you hope to have your research gap. Okay, which is the final part. Then you know that, okay, if I look at the controller design, if I look at this technique, there are no researcher working on this technique using this tool in this application. There you can get there. Okay, this is my research gap. Okay, then that will highlight your research tool, which is basically your research methodology. That's how I would do, Aradhana.
Next question we have is from Vishnu Sonawane. Could you
Yes,
please?
sir. May I ask this one question, Vishnu Sonawane? Sir, my question is how much percentage of data we can take for the journal paper publishing or the thesis from the literature review or from the old journal or conference or proceeding? What is the percentage maximum? How much data we can take, sir?
Okay, this is about secondary data. To me, there is no exact number of percentage that we could use. We could have to the extreme 100%, but I always refer our work. Okay, you could say that, okay, based on the work of Vishnu, 2021, okay, he reported that the data gathered shows that the percentage of students did this. However, based on the same, if you could get that data, raw data, if you get the data, of course you can get the data by asking that authors get permission. That's why you get the permission. And then when you get the permission, the author might ask you for what purpose. So it's up to him or her to give you the data, unless the data is being published in a journal. So complete data is being published in the journal, then it's up to us because that data is an open, in a public domain. We just have to cite that data from certain tables, certain figures in the journal. And then up to you. But you must always be careful when you cite some other people's journals, when you critically comment on that data. We must be very careful because this is the work of other people. Okay, we do not want to criticize other people's data in such a way that we are not completely understand how the data are being obtained. You might create a bad relationship with the authors later on if you start to scrutinize his or her data without fully understood how the data is being obtained. So you must have a clear, concise information about those data before you could using that data for your own work. Okay, Vishnu, be
Yes,
very
sir.
careful.
Sir, my second question is here: if the data is the primary data or the secondary data, here shall I mix into this this paper, sir, or if it is the this primary data as the the three four types, secondary data as 3-4 types? Shall I take this all this type all the types or the here these data should be in the form of only one?
I don't quite get you, but whenever you use primary data, you can always use secondary data to emphasize your work. You could say that, okay, in your results section, okay, based on the data obtained through this method, okay, through your own method, for example, you devise a new method, you have your own data. You could say that, okay, this data obtained here using this method is comparable to the work of through the work of Sivarao that use another method. So this is kind of like you cross-check your work, okay? The pattern is the same. Okay, the secondary data that you obtain from certain journal or from certain report is comparable to the amount to the data or pattern of data that you obtain on your own work. So this is normally we do during in our result and discussion section. We correlate our work, we cross-check our work with some data from the literature. I hope I understand. I answer you, Vishnu.
Thank you.
Okay, you are welcome.
Okay, next question is from Nakul Sharma. Sir, could you unmute your mic?
Yes, sir. Good morning, sir. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good
so thank you
afternoon.
for a good session. Sir, you talked a lot about data basically, and it consists of primary data as well as the secondary data. So you had mentioned a point regarding both of them, that primary data and secondary data both should be matched with each other. So, sir, are there any specific tools for matching secondary data with primary data? Because, sir, see, secondary data is more to deal with interpretation and analysis. So, is there any tool for matching both of them, sir?
Okay, I think the word matching is not. It's when I mean by matching is that it must be on the same understanding, meaning that we are working on the same basis line. Okay, if you work on you do not want to match your primary data that you collected with something which is not related to or which is not fully related to your work. So that's what I mean. Okay, you might be working on some technique that you improvise, you enhance. There might be some other people who have worked on that technique, but you enhance it further, and you have collected your data. So you could use your data, the pattern that you obtain from your method, to compare it or match it. Matching here meaning that you try to validate the kind of improvement maybe that you obtain by enhancing certain techniques, certain design method, for example, with data that have been previously presented or that is that is commonly available. That's what I mean by matching. Okay, or unless you are using that data per se in your own word directly, then you must have to make sure that you are using it in the right context. That's what I mean by matching.
Okay, sir. So basically, it means we are trying to do comparative analysis with respect to our work and other people's work, like that.
Yeah. But be very careful when you compare. They can invite a lot of questions when you compare, because we are afraid that we are not comparing it equally. That is always the difficulties when we comparing work. Just be very careful on that. Okay.
Right, sir. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Right. Yeah, welcome.
Okay, before the next question has been taken, the feedback link will be posted in the chat box. So I request all the participants to please use your unique participant ID to fill the feedback form. It's posted in the group right now, chat box. Meanwhile, we can continue with the question and answer sessions. Now I request Dr. Kushbu Kumar to please ask his question. Please unmute yourself, sir.
Good afternoon, sir. This is Dr.
Dr.
Kushbu Kumar, Assistant Professor from SHIET School of Business, Varanasi. Sir, my doubt was regarding the methodological challenges that we are facing in qualitative research right now, sir. Because I am sharing my personal experience. I had to take prior permission from the Research Ethics Board regarding the use of audio recorders. But still, after getting the permission, also I was not able to maintain the anonymity of the vulnerable group specifically. So can you tell me like how to overcome these challenges in qualitative research?
Okay, Dr. Kushbu, I didn't quite get your question just now. You talk about audio recording.
Methodological challenges, sir. Methodological challenges in qualitative research, especially when I am in qualitative.
Qualitative.
Yeah, qualitative.
Okay, this is to recordings.
Yeah. Like I want to use that audio recorder for say vulnerable groups to take their statements. But in that case, how to ensure their anonymity, sir?
Okay. The first thing is that how do you identify this respondent? Is it because
Sir, I took part in that government program that they are facilitating to those vulnerable groups in certain area, certain state. So I was just trying to assess the effectiveness of government program in that particular vulnerable group, sir.
So they are recording their. So you are communicating with them.
Yes,
through phone. Is it through phone or through
yes,
online?
No, sir. No, sir. Face-to-face
online,
meeting.
Face-to-face.
Meeting.
And it has to be face-to-face. It has.
Yeah.
Does it have to be face-to-face, or could it be done through
Yeah,
questionnaire then?
Sir, it was a kind of a brainstorming session also, and it was I had some structured questionnaire as well to record their responses.
Okay, because if that's the case, that will be very difficult to
yeah, that's what the challenge I'm facing, sir.
Unless you change the tool, you can
yeah,
get
so you can get sir?
You can get similar. Firstly, you must identify what kind of information that you would like to get from the respondent. Okay, what are the information, and then you try to identify what are the tools that I can use to get that information. Okay, I might not need to look at their face. I might not need to listen to their voice. So if that's the case, then you look at what are the kind of tools that we could use. For example, you could use a lot of nowadays a lot of online tools that we could use. For example, like questionnaire, right?
Yeah.
That we could develop online without people declaring who they are. But somehow also you have to have some to validate whether this is the right people. So I don't know.
Yes, in qualitative research, the validation is the main issue because I am not knowing in case of questionnaire if I mail them, even those people, those who are residing in small villages, they don't have access to smartphones or internet facility. So they will not be able to fill those questionnaires through mails or certain any kind. So that's why I thought of taking face-to-face interviews only, and I wanted to ask those questions in person itself. So that they can answer freely, and in case they have any doubt in understanding the questions, I can explain them well.
Okay, if that's the case, then face-to-face is the only option.
Yes,
but you need to look at their face, right?
Yeah.
They might not have to introduce themselves. Okay, so you might not know who they are. They might give
I don't ask their names, sir. I never ask their names. I just record their statement.
Meaning that you might not need to know where they come from, where their locality, maybe just a bit of background. That should be okay then if you can.
But research ethics board is not okay with that, sir. They don't give the permission. That's what the challenge I'm facing, sir. And sir, one more challenge is there, sir, in case of qualitative research. When I try to publish these qualitative research study in, we say, Scopus Index journals or SSCI Index journals, they ask me that what is the generalizability of these results in global context. So how to justify that, sir?
In global context, and then you have to look
can you
at
please throw some light on this, sir?
This is a tough one, Doctor. In the global context, then no, it's okay, don't worry. I will try my best. In the global context, if they are looking for that, then you have to look at the broader aspect of it. Try to find a journal, which or through sometimes United Nations, for example, or the World Organization, WHO. If you work in WHO, UN, UNESCO, they have those kind of report. They publish annually, quarterly.
Yeah, they publish their reports.
Then what you could do is that you try to correlate your work or your result with those reports, which might be based on continents, it might be based on countries to countries. That would be my suggestion. And then
thank you very much.
I hope I'm helping you here.
Yeah, exactly, sir. This was a very good idea. Actually, I've never had this idea that I can relate my results to those UNESCO reports and UN reports.
Just indicate which year that report came from. Okay. So that it can
definitely,
be
sir. Definitely, I will look through it. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, you're most welcome, Dr. Kushbu.
Okay, next question is by Vijayamala. Please unmute yourself and ask the question.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Vijayamala.
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, my question is, what kind of data can be collected to analyze things in the agricultural field, sir?
Okay. What is your background?
Sir, mathematics, sir.
Mathematics.
I'm thinking of using the graph theory tools and analyze the agricultural field, sir. So what kind of data I can collect?
I could see that you might be working on some mathematical modeling. Okay, so then your application will be in agriculture.
Yes,
so
sir.
nowadays maybe the kind of data that you could a lot of data you could take, but what interests you could be in terms of the the amount of harvesting, maybe. Okay, the
Okay.
productivity of a certain agricultural plot. So
Okay.
you might be interested in terms of the number of crop produced.
Okay.
Okay, in terms of the metric tonnage or whatever. So you might also be interested in terms of the quality of the soil.
Okay.
So you might have to use certain sensors that could automatically read the soil quality. You can also take a look at the moisture level. You could take a look at the so this kind of data, productivity data, number of crops gathered per session or per plantation, soil quality, rainfall. If it is indoor, then humidity. Sometimes you can have indoor. Nowadays, they have a lot of intelligent IoT type indoor plantation for basically for vegetables. So you have air quality, temperature, humidity, those kind of thing, lighting. If you are supplementing sunlight with lighting. So those are the kind of data that you could collect, and it depends on what kind of model that you would like to have. Maybe I don't know. Try to optimize something, optimize by in terms of the number of irrigation, the number of water to water the plants. Is it daily? What is the optimum amount of water to use? Something like that. Okay.
Okay, sir.
So it should work on optimization, I think.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm thinking of that. Okay.
I hope I helped you, Vijayamala.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir. It helped.
No problem.
Thank you.
Next question will be by B. Rupla Naik. Can you please unmute yourself? B. Rupla Naik. All right, then we'll go to the next question by Mr. Mohammad Jainlal Abedin. Please unmute yourself, sir. Mr. Mohammed, you can ask your question. Okay, so I think this will be the end of the question, sir. Thank you very much for your wonderful talk and the way that you have actually handled the questions and all. Thank you so much. We're really glad to have you.
I hope I answered them well. I hope so. Thank you so much, Mr. Silas, for having me here, and to all the audience. I hope you get some good information from my presentation this afternoon and this morning. It helps you all, and good luck to all of you in your future undertaking, your research work. And thank you to Landy for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Dear participants, we have come to the end of session 1 for the day 1. We will now break for lunch and gather at 1:30 p.m. for the second session. The topic for the second session is Ethics and Research by Professor Ramesh Chandra Panda. He's a Dean for Research and Development from Synergy Institute of Engineering and Technology, Denkanal. So I request you all to please have your lunch quickly and come join us at 1:30 p.m. I'll see you all. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.